The Diaries is made possible by Diaries Plus members. And guess what? That could be you. That's right. If you're enjoying our regular episodes, shorts, interviews, our And Then What series on public lands, or a mix of it all, please consider becoming a Diaries Plus member. It's ad-free listening, but maybe more importantly, it's about knowing that you've stepped up to support something you believe is worthwhile, and the delight of something you want to see in your feed, something you believe needs to be there, because that's how Diaries Plus members feel. Come power the show. The link is in the show notes. Thank you.
It was gone. My bike, my gear, everything stolen in the night. My stomach sank as I stared at the empty space where my rig had been. I was 1,800 kilometers into a 3,000 kilometer journey down the Pacific coast, alone, with no map, no plan, and now no bike. This wasn't just a logistical problem. It was the final gut-wrenching blow to the fragile sense of security I'd been clinging to since the start of this trip. But before I tell you how I got out of that mess, let me take you back to the start. 4 months earlier, I had been on the west coast of Canada, Vancouver Island, grappling with the fallout of a 7-year relationship that had ended in heartbreak. I thought I would marry him. He was my best friend, after all. Instead, I found myself with no partner, no home, and barely enough savings to scrape by. Those first few weeks were a blur. My life felt like a jigsaw puzzle with no picture on the box. Just pieces scattered everywhere with no clear sense of how they were supposed to fit together. One thing became clear. I needed to leave. Not just the apartment we shared, but my comfort zone entirely. I picked up Cheryl Strayed's Wild one evening, a book that had been gathering dust on my shelf. As I turned its pages, I got lost in the allure of the trail. I admired the leap of faith she took, and the strength she found from within. A thought took hold of me. I could do this. At least, I think I could. But instead of hiking, I'll do it on my bike. Maybe it would spare me the worst of the physical suffering she endured. And just like that, the seed of my journey was planted. That's how I found myself setting out on a bikepacking trip from Victoria, BC to Tijuana, Mexico, despite only having ridden a fully loaded bike once before and never really having cooked on a backpacking stove by myself. Self-doubt has always been my constant companion. Yet, as I packed my panniers with little more than a cheap Canadian Tire sleeping bag, a secondhand bivvy tent no taller than my own knees, and a vague sense of direction, all I have to do is go south, right? I convinced myself, if I could do this, maybe I could piece my life back together. The morning I locked our shared apartment door for the very last time and dropped my keys off with our landlord, I felt like I was walking the plank. Every pedal towards the ferry terminal in Victoria felt heavier than the last. What was I doing? I wasn't fit enough for this. I surely wasn't brave enough for this. I kept this trip mostly to myself, not really telling many people about my departure. I was afraid of the embarrassment if I were to fail. As the ferry pulled away, the city I knew disappeared behind a shroud of mist. I even watched our apartment sail by. The one where I had watched the ferry pass by so many times, but this time I was actually on it. My heart pounded, my hands trembled, and I gripped the rail to steady myself. This wasn't just a trip, it was a leap into the complete unknown. The first few days were humbling. Pedaling off the ferry on the Washington state side, I nearly veered into traffic under the weight of my overloaded bike. Further down the highway, a logging truck whooshed past me so close I swear I could have leaned in and high-fived the driver. It was the kind of near miss that makes you question your life choices, which I was doing hourly at this point. My phone lacked roaming data, so I relied on blurry photos of maps I had taken beforehand, squinting to decipher my next turn. Needless to say, I had to double back several times. Every hill, even the smallest, felt insurmountable. My legs burned from the constant strain, and in those first few days, my seat felt like a torture device. By day 3, the pain was so severe that my eyes watered every time I sat back down after a stop. My shoulders ached from being hunched over, and my wrists throbbed from leaning on the handlebars. That night, I crawled into my sleeping bag, shivering, tears rolling down my face and questioning my sanity. Speaking of my sleeping bag, it was a cruel joke. The label boasted hike and bike, and in my naivete, I thought it must be perfectly suited for my adventure. It turned out to be as effective as laying a piece of paper towel over myself. I spent the first night shivering, the damp air of the Pacific Northwest in May seeping into my bones. The shivering was uncontrollable, until it was so severe my abs were sore and my back was cramping. I glanced at my watch. Not even midnight. My old Swedish Alpine stove was another gem of a purchase. A secondhand relic so indestructible it could probably survive a fall from a skyscraper. But every time I fired it up, it threw flames so unpredictably intimidating that I feared sparking a forest fire. Most evenings I opted to eat my dehydrated meals crunchy and cold, rather than risk burning down the forest around me. Before leaving, I imagined myself riding into campgrounds to the smiles and welcomes of fellow riders doing the same. We would laugh and commiserate, swapping stories from the road over a roaring fire, and chuckling at our own insanity. But as each quiet day passed and I rode into empty campground after empty campground, my spirits grew thin, and I wondered if anyone else was on this journey with me. I felt so utterly alone. Fear followed me into every campsite. Every rustle of leaves, every crack of a branch sent adrenaline coursing through my veins. I imagined predators lurking just beyond the glow of my flashlight. Bears, mountain lions, dangerous people. I conjured them all in my mind, ready to attack me in my sleep. I clutched my knife under my sleeping bag, lying awake, rigid with terror, until exhaustion overtook me in the early hours of the morning. 2 weeks passed before I encountered another rider. His name was Ben. A jolly young line cook with shaggy blonde bangs who quit his job for an ambitious dream of cycling across the United States from west to east coast with nothing but a hammock. It turns out he was just as cold as I was. I relished the company that day. We crouched under a tin roof of a coffee stand on the side of the road, sheltering ourselves from the cold Washington drizzle as we tried to warm up our frigid fingers against a hot cup of coffee. It felt easier to suffer through the cold burst of wind on our wet clothing that afternoon with another by my side. But soon enough, it was time for him to begin his journey east. We reluctantly waved each other off, and I continued my journey south. Somewhere in southern Oregon, I rounded a corner to find a black bear standing on the road. My breath caught. It's one thing to imagine confronting a bear. It's another to face one, alone, with no escape route. The bear stared at me. I froze. Every bear awareness training I had ever taken told me to make myself big, speak deeply, and make loud banging noises. I did none of those things. Instead, I completely blanked. I just stood there, frozen, a small, insignificant girl on a tiny frame with zero ability to outbike this bear. It was as if my body had decided, go on, take me. I'm already at my lowest anyways. But the bear didn't move. It didn't take a step forward towards me, nor did it scurry away. It just continued to stare at me, almost with a deep curiosity about what the heck I was doing out here. I was filled with both wonder at how beautiful this creature was, and also fear about how easily it could spring towards me and devour my head in its mouth. I had never been so close to a bear before, and in my stupor of being alone on the road for so many days, it was almost a comforting presence, as if to tell me everything will be okay. You are going to make it through this. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours, and the bear slowly turned and sauntered into the woods. I took my first exhale. I realized I had been holding my breath. My hands and legs were trembling, and my cheeks were wet with tears, as if all of the sorrow had suddenly been given permission to release. I realized in that moment how much I had been holding on to. I needed to snap out of my fear and self-doubt. Yes, this ride was harder than I ever could have imagined, but I needed to stop being so hard on myself and so afraid of what lied ahead. The trip became about more than just the miles. It was about the moments in between. The kindness of strangers who shared meals and stories, the quiet beauty of coastal sunsets, the fleeting sense of freedom as I coasted downhill with the wind at my back. There was the pastor in Oregon who invited me to stay the night in his church to escape the rain after we struck up a casual conversation during one of my water breaks. The elderly woman in Northern California who let me wash my one and only outfit, with myself and a fellow rider sharing dinner at her house. There was Mark, a solo gentleman on a mission to spend 6 months riding in Europe, who spent an evening swapping tales with me over a pack of Oreo cookies and milk in his kitchen. And the 2 German cyclists following the same route as I, hooting and hollering as all 3 of us crossed the Golden Gate Bridge into San Francisco together. Each act of kindness became a stitch in the fabric of this journey, reinforcing the belief that the world, despite its challenges, is full of good people. A month into the trip, I had found my groove. I settled into a nice flow, feeling calmer, lighter, and more confident. I began enjoying my solitude and the surprise meetings with strangers on the road. I wrote about it one evening in my journal while watching the gorgeous orange hue of the sunset below the horizon south of San Francisco. It was the first night I finally felt warm in my sleeping bag, and I swear I fell asleep with a smile on my face. But then came the theft. I had camped along a gorgeous stretch of sandy beach, exhausted after a long day of riding uphill. I slept in, and I woke to an eerie silence. My tent was untouched, but when I unzipped the fly, the bike and my gear were gone. Panic swelled as I realized the enormity of what I had just lost. Without my bike, I was stranded. I was vulnerable and completely dependent on the mercy of strangers. The next few hours were a complete blur. I sat in a room with a local park ranger choking back tears. I stole a few bars of Wi-Fi to quickly scribble a short message to friends and family. Bike stolen, will update later. It felt like rock bottom. But then something incredible happened. Locals heard about my story, and they began rallying. One woman offered me a ride to the next town. Another offered a place to stay while I figured out my next move. A man offered me some old bike bags I could have, and a cyclist gave me his spare tire pump, saying, "You'll need this when you get back on the road." And I began receiving messages from back home. Encouragement to keep going. Their belief in me rekindled my own. With their words and the help of locals, I pieced together a makeshift kit and a used bike, a clunky 30-pound monster that slowed me down immensely. But it was a bike. It didn't matter how it looked or how heavy it was. It was my ticket back on the road. With every piece of borrowed gear, I felt a little more of my confidence return. It wasn't the perfect setup, far from it, but it was enough to keep going. And that's what I needed most, just to keep moving forward. When I finally pedaled out of town, I realized that this wasn't just about getting to Tijuana anymore. It never was. It was about proving to myself that I could face setbacks, adapt, and still find a way to carry on. I began to redefine what success on this trip looked like. It wasn't about the perfect ride or sticking to some imaginary plan. It was about showing up every single day, no matter how hard it was, and finding beauty in that struggle. As the miles ticked by, I stopped worrying so much about what I didn't have and focused instead on what I did. The kindness of strangers, the resilience I didn't know I possessed, and the stunning coastline unfolding before me. I learned to embrace the unknown, finding joy in the surprises that each day brought. By the time I crossed the border into Mexico 50 days later, I wasn't the same person who had left Victoria. I was stronger, not just physically, but emotionally. The heartbreak that had propelled me to start this journey no longer felt like an anchor. It had transformed into a foundation, a reminder that even in the aftermath of loss, there is still so much life to be lived. The Pacific Coast had tested me in ways I never anticipated. It stripped away my comforts, it confronted me with my fears, and it forced me to rely on the kindness of others. But it had also given me something priceless: the understanding that I was capable of more than I ever believed. Almost wild? Maybe. But as I rolled into Tijuana, sunburnt and exhausted, with a smile stretching across my face, I realized almost is all it takes to change everything. My name is Amie Renaud, and this is my short.
After the break, Joanna Henry grapples with an uninvited passenger. Stay with us. Since 2008, Kuat has made industry-changing products manufactured with the utmost care to ensure quality, style, and longevity. Their new piston ion rack is no exception. Built tough and ready for adventure, the rack has Kuat's signature style without compromising on function. The rack is purpose-built for today's e-bikes, carrying up to two 100-pound e-bikes with no frame contact, and an adjustable tire chock system so you can carry your bikes with a range of tire sizes. It even comes with a lightweight bike ramp for hassle-free loading, which is pretty sweet. Check out the piston ion rack at kuat.com or a dealer near you. Kuat, because you love your bike. Even though it's dark before I get home from work, even though it's getting colder and rainier and crappier, I still love getting out on the trails, just to clear my mind. Oboes set up camp in the legendary hiking and backpacking hub of Bozeman, Montana, and you know what? It gets really cold there, so they know a thing about how to hike and move in the cold, and they know insulated footwear. Oboes has several new styles built for snowy days and winter hiking, so you can get out and enjoy the most soulful time of year, the time when there's fewer people, it's a little bit quieter, and the light is amazing. Find your favorite at obosfootwear.com/lovehiking. Oboes Footwear. Love hiking. This is the time of year where my life gets super chaotic. You know why? The snow starts falling, and it doesn't do it on a regular schedule. Throw the holidays into that whole thing, and I get pretty reactive. I'm getting up early, I'm staying out late, and a lot of times that means I'm missing meals or struggling to maintain my nutrition. Kajava is my secret weapon for this time of year. It makes it easy to get the protein I need to stay fueled and energized throughout the season. Kajava's whole body meal shakes keep your body and mind nourished all day. With 2 scoops of Kajava, you get 85 plus superfoods, nutrients, and plant-based ingredients. And with vitamin C, zinc, and probiotics, I'm giving my immune system a little extra nourishment. For a limited time, Kajava has a new flavor, chocolate mint. It's a perfect mix of rich chocolate and cool mint that does not have a sugar hangover. Keep your holiday game strong. Get those powder days. Go to Kachava.com and use code DIARIES for 15% off your next order. That's Kachava, Kachava.com, code DIARIES for 15% off.
I was in a rotten mood as I walked to my car that crisp September morning in Toronto. I was angry it was September, for starters. I resented the trees and the autumnal hues that were just beginning to peek out along the edges of their leaves. Red, orange, yellow, purple. Like coy flashes of playfully colored lingerie, this was nothing more than smoke and mirrors, a trick to distract and delight us while summer quietly slipped off stage. Ta-da! It's winter! Nice try, trees. You think I'm falling for that? Like I said, rotten mood. Granted, I was drawing from a pretty lean emotional portfolio those days, reduced primarily to sorrow, numbness, and anger. Anger was a bit of a surprise. It wasn't my normal go-to, but following the death of my younger brother a few weeks earlier, I discovered that I actually possessed quite an impressive anger palette, from agitated to explosive and all the shades between. That particular morning was a study in simmering. When I got to the car and saw a spiderweb strung from the top of my driver's side window to the mirror, I layered in a nice shade of resentment. This was another thing I hated about autumn. A couple of brisk evenings and suddenly the front porch is festooned with fat strings of bulbous spiders, and my apartment becomes a drop-in center for 8-legged appraisers with an interest in indoor living. And now this? I grabbed a slender branch from the ground. "No way, dirtbag," I muttered as I swept and twirled the last of the silky remnants onto the stick. "You aren't turning my car into your winter getaway, you rat-faced, shite-baked arse of a chunderwad." This wasn't just anger talking at this point. Fear had joined in and was helping craft some of the more colorful turns of phrases. Fear is an excellent wordsmith, while anger tends to stick with the more pedestrian of the swears. I'd been terrified of spiders for as long as I can remember being me. Big, small, size of Montreal, no difference. Even a photo of a spider is enough to spike the cortisol. This long-standing phobia is likely why spiders always star in my apocalyptic nightmares, and I'd been having a lot of those. They started around the time my brother Josh was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. That was also when fear moved in with me. She didn't ask permission. She didn't even take the guest room. She stayed throughout the 4 years of his illness, never paying a cent in rent. During the day, Josh's belligerent optimism helped keep fear at bay. He knew death was coming, but was determined to live while he was alive. Every day, he just kept spinning hope out of despair and laughter out of heartache, and those lucky enough to be in his orbit soaked in his light. The evenings were a different story. Each night, fear crawled into my bed and spooned me, her soft breath on the back of my neck. When I woke up screaming, desperately trying to brush the nightmare spiders off my body, she held me tight and whispered, "I've got you, shh, I've got you." When Josh died, fear packed her bags and moved out in order to make room for my new bedmate, grief. I didn't miss fear. She and her dream spiders could go straight to HE double hockey sticks for all I cared, and while she was at it, she could take the stupid spider camping on my car. After clearing the web from said stupid spider, I still needed to figure out where she was hiding. The last thing I needed was a spider popping out at me while I was driving. My best guess was that she was tucked up where the web met the windowsill. That was manageable. All I had to do was keep my window rolled up until we had a good couple kill months under our belt. "Winter's coming," I promised my unseen hitchhiker as I settled in behind the wheel. The next day, the web was back. I cleared it with equal vigor. And the next? And the next. On the 5th morning, I finally caught a glimpse of my tormentor. She wasn't in the windowsill after all. She was in the mirror, squeezed into the small crack between the glass and the frame, tiny front legs poised over the trigger strings of her new web. She was small and tentative, the color of an acorn. Curiosity guided me into a squat so I could get a better look. Internally, something shifted. A panel rolled along invisible tracks, and suddenly there was a room where once there was only a wall. "Hey, Bodine," I spoke without intending to. I didn't clear the web that morning. I looked at it. How had such a small spider managed such an accomplishment? I imagined her, night after night, scaling the window all the way to the tippy top and then launching herself outwards for the distant target of the mirror, her silk strung out behind her like a gossamer bungee cord. I had to admit it. Bodine was a bit of a badass. I got in and started the car. The tiny body retreated further behind the mirror. Buckle up, Bodine. After that, wherever I went, Bodine tagged along, and I got to know her. She was an adaptive little arachnid. Her web always blew apart as I drove, but each successive build was just a bit more aerodynamic, staying intact at ever-increasing speeds. I had a flash of concern about how she'd fare with wind speeds during our first trip on the expressway, but it was baseless. Bodine was a natural survivor. Despite this, I became quite protective of her. When a friend's purse came a bit too close to sweeping my car's mirror, I yelled at her to watch what she was doing. She looked confused. I pointed out the web. She looked confused. That's Bodine. She rides with me. My friend did not understand. But then again, neither did I. I had no idea the source of this wellspring of affection for Bodine. For some reason, her presence provided me with a jolt of pleasure, elation even. I felt proud of her and her tiny tenacity, rebuilding her web every night after the events of the day tore it all apart. I felt kind of proud of myself. Who else had a winged spider? She and I cruised the city in the last of those late summer days, Missy Elliott's Work It blasting from the radio. We were like a modern-day mashup of Thelma and Louise meets Charlotte's Web. Unfrickin' stoppable. The day came when Bodine would accompany me on a trip to Pennsylvania to visit my then-boyfriend who taught at Penn State. At 3.5 hours, it would be our longest road trip yet, international travel no less. You bringing anything into the U.S. with you? The border guard asked. No, ma'am, I replied. One Canadian spider, I thought. Genus Baticus asaphysicus. When I arrived, I did a quick check on Bodine, but I didn't see her. I brought in my bags, kissed my boyfriend, and we headed out to the door for dinner. I performed another check and whooshed out the breath I didn't realize I was holding when I saw the tips of those little brown legs hooked over the top of the mirror. My partner looked quizzical. I had yet to fess up that I had developed a significant emotional bond with another. No time like the present. I was just worried about Bodine. She lives behind my car mirror. She's kind of my spider, I ended lamely. I didn't have an adequate descriptor for Bodine, but felt horrible calling her my spider. Bodine didn't belong to anybody. How do you know it's a she, was all he asked. This was territory we had covered long ago in our relationship. He knew that I had courageously taken on the staggering overuse of the masculine pronoun in our society. For instance, go to the zoo and all you'll hear is, oh, look at him climbing that tree, or his teeth are so big, or he's nursing his baby. But if you say, wow, she's really fighting for that chicken carcass, someone invariably asks, how do you know it's a she? And, since we all know that misogyny is in the details, I am all over this important cause, like stripes on a she-tiger. But tigress? Anyway, I didn't bother to explain this again to my boyfriend, because this was just a toss-away question that really meant, I have no idea what to say to you. R.I.P. that relationship. Besides, I wasn't asserting that Bodine was a she purely on principle. I just knew. I was packing my car the morning of my return to Toronto, and I noticed Bodine out on her web. This was the first time I'd seen more than the tips of her little legs, and was delighted by the unexpected white racing stripe that adorned her round back. She'd gone all out on her web, her largest yet, each perfect spiraling strand catching the sunlight. I watched her work, a tiny, self-contained being in her small corner of the world. I found myself contemplating the life force that quickened her little limbs. Was it any different than my own? Couldn't see how. After several minutes of being swept up in the miracle that was Bodine, I reminded myself that I had a job to get to and it was time to hit the road. Engine on, Bodine in position, let's ride. Less than 5 minutes into the trip, and disaster struck. I glanced to my mirror to change lanes and gasped. Bodine had ventured from the safety of her mirror and was in the center of her enormous web that was tossing violently in the wind. Bodine was vibrating so quickly, it looked as if there were two of her hanging on for dear life. I slammed on the brakes and would have been rear-ended if not for the talented man in the pickup truck behind me who was able to steer around me, lay on his horn, and give me the finger all at the same time. I owed him one. Heart hammering and web bucking, I swerved through 3 lanes of traffic, knifed into a get-go gas station, parked and jumped out of my car. "Bodine, what are you doing? We're driving. You have to stay down," I hollered at my mirror in the middle of a very busy gas station. I got back in my car in a huff, and Bodine scurried behind the mirror. "And stay there," I shouted once more for good measure. But she didn't. At the next stoplight, I saw her head out again onto her web, making repairs. I couldn't understand this reckless behavior. I banged on the window and yelled at her. The light turned green. I had to go. I willed my eyes to the road, determined not to cause an accident. I approached the ramp to the highway, and as I picked up speed, something small, round, and dark flew past the window. I whipped my head to the mirror. No Bodine. My heart stopped. The world went silent. For an instant, there was nothing but nothing. And then it hit. Tsunami of grief that somehow Bodine had held off for a while. I wept as I drove like my heart was broken. I pounded the steering wheel, tears blurring my view while I yelled at no one at all. "Why, Bodine? Why are you gone? Why couldn't you stay longer?" Call it stupid, but I loved her. She was a little life sharing the same space as me for a time, sharing the same road as me for a time, and I loved her. But it didn't hold her to me. And that's the thing about love. It feels like the most powerful force in the world. Its bonds feel like tempered steel coiled around the ones we love, but they're more fragile than spider silk in the end. Those we care for can still slip right through our web of love. Love is many things, but it is not a net. I cried myself out until I was numb and empty. As I drove, I kept looking at Bodine's mirror, hoping I was mistaken, but all I saw was me, staring back with red, swollen eyes. The drive home was long and lonely, as was the night. The walk to the car the next morning was more achy than angry. I felt drained of all my tears. But when I reached the car and saw the new web strung up in my mirror, I found I still had a few more left in me. Sweet Bodine, we still had a little more time together after all. I am not brave like my brother. We've been on the road of life together since the start, and without him, I no longer knew where I was going, or even how to keep going. Or for that moment, I would take the gift of that spider-sized infusion of hope, tenacity, and belligerent optimism, enough to get through one more day. I crouched down to admire her beautiful web. "Hey, Bodine, how are you this morning? Ready to ride?" My name is Joanna Henry, and this is my short.
Thank you, Amie and Joanna, for sharing your stories. Our stories come from friends of friends, and from you, our community. If you have a compelling idea for a guest or a story lead, please give us a shout. You can email us at editor@ducktapethembeer.com. Thanks to the folks who have recently become Diaries Plus members, and those of you who continue to support the show. It is the difference between us being here and not. Huge shout out. Thank you. Want another way to help? We understand not everyone can afford Diaries Plus, but you can write us a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps others find the show. It's awesome. It is actually a tried and true way of making a show grow. So if you can help, do that. Music today from Feverkin, Leslie Capri, Spatial Relations, Bolo, Brendan Burns, Joya, Benny Reed, and Brendan O'Connell. The tracks are courtesy of the artist or track club. Jacob Bain and Niskoto composed our theme song. You can find the artist at our website, dirtbagdiaries.com. This episode was produced by Becca Cahal and Skylar Perwins. Becca is our executive producer, and I'm Fitz Cahal. You've been listening to the Dirtbag Diaries. Happy holidays, and thanks for tuning in.